It's the first day of Eid in Egypt, and supporters of Mohamed Morsi are still out on the streets. Egypt's new rulers say efforts to solve the crisis have failed, and they're running out of patience with protesters. Egypt, the political deadlock and prospects for violence. This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Veronica Pedroza. Muslims in Egypt are celebrating the Eid holiday, but this year those celebrations are divided along political lines. Egyptians opposed to deposed President Mohamed Morsi united with members of the army to perform Eid prayers in Tahrir Square. Across Cairo, where supporters of Mohamed Morsi have been rallying for weeks, the mood's jubilant. Despite the threat of a security crackdown, they're still demanding that Morsi be released and reinstated. But Egypt's interim prime minister says the government's grown weary with the protests and has vowed to break them up.
The cabinet warns against the dangerous escalation and continuous incitement by the Muslim Brotherhood, a matter that threatens the security of the state. The government confirms that it will keep protecting the people's will that was shown on the 30th of June.
And envoys from the US, Europe and the Gulf have been trying to find common ground between the two sides in 2 weeks of intense mediation. The US and the European Union have warned Egypt now faces a dangerous political stalemate. A joint statement said the Egyptian government has a special responsibility to find a solution. But Egypt's interim president says diplomatic efforts have failed, and he blames the Muslim Brotherhood. For more on this, I'm joined by our three guests. From Washington, D.C., Adel Iskander, Georgetown University professor and author of Egypt in Flux, Essays on an Unfinished Revolution. From here in Doha, Khaled Dawood, a spokesman for the National Salvation Front, a coalition of liberal and leftist parties. And joining us via Skype from Alexandria, Mohamed Soudan, Foreign Relations Secretary for the Freedom and Justice Party. Thanks very much indeed to you all, gentlemen. Let's take this opportunity of Eid, just as they're doing in Egypt, to assess, first of all, where Egypt is at the moment. State-owned newspapers have splashed giant red headlines such as "The Last Warning," "Government to Brotherhood Diplomacy is Finished," "Egypt rejects sermons from the American Satan." But what does this really mean? Will the government, the military, clear these demonstrations off the streets by force? Khaled Dawood, what is your impression?
Of course, Egypt is going through a very critical stage. We're almost in a state of turmoil for the past 40 days, even before the ouster of former President Morsi. Unfortunately, we are still unable to fulfill the original demands of the Egyptian revolution, the 25th of January revolution, which was bread, freedom and social justice. The change that happened on June 30 and the millions who went out in the streets were mainly aiming at restoring the goals of this revolution after the former president and his political group, the Muslim Brotherhood, basically deviated and betrayed all those major goals and mainly aimed at enabling themselves and strengthening the group alone at the expense of the majority of Egyptians. Over the past year, we did not have a president for Egypt. We had a president for the Muslim Brotherhood group alone. And that's why we hope to look for the future and to restore the unity of our country.
Well, let me ask you this, Khaled Dawood. There were many people who were killed on July the 26th as a result of, as you put it, trying to put the revolution back on track. There is now this fear that there could be more violence. Is it justified?
I don't think that any violence is justified. I strongly believe that the lives of every single Egyptian is very precious. There is no intentional use of violence. Unfortunately, despite the claims by the Muslim Brotherhood supporters that they are peaceful protests and peaceful sit-in, that's totally ridiculous in my point of view, because on a daily basis they go for demonstrations that aim at attacking military installations or even getting into clashes with regular citizens who oppose their views.
All right.
And even we have some very clear pictures of some Muslim Brotherhood supporters using guns, using pistols. So this claim is totally false. I don't think that in any country in the world you would see this state of stalemate. They're building barricades,
let me ask
walls.
Mohammed Sudan to respond to those widely publicized views about what the Muslim Brotherhood is doing. Let me ask you, what is the position of your party? Is violence justified in reinstating Mohamed Morsi?
Actually, every time they accuse us that we are armed and we have guns, we have knives, we have virtual guns, something like this, I believe that who been killed in the last 30 days, especially in the 6 massacres which happened. We have now almost 500 people being killed. We have almost 9,000 people being injured. We have a lot of people lost their eyes. This is what's going on in the street. We have a lot of videos show that the police and the army and their thugs are killing our protesters while they were praying. I don't think that our people, while they pray, they're going to shoot any other thing. We protest, yes, we protest. We sit in, yes, we sit in, because we have demands and they have demands. But here is the leaders of the coup in Egypt. They divided the Egyptian people into major divisions. The first division belongs to the coup, which the Marshal Sisi said that I am moved to this kind of coup or this kind of be against the legitimacy because of the uprising of the Egyptian people in the Tahrir Square. How about the millions all over Egypt? How about these people who sit in the streets for almost 40 days? How about this kind of
Can
people
I ask you,
being killed?
Mohammed Sudan, also to narrow in on that, to focus in on that question that I'm asking you. There is a real fear that at the end of the 3-day Eid holiday, there might be moves to force your supporters off the streets. What will be the response of the Muslim Brotherhood and your party, the Freedom and Justice Party? Will you use violence?
I think that whatever the answer came this morning, when you find out about 7 million people came to the Rab'a al-Adawiyya and they pray Eid prayer in Rab'a al-Adawiyya, and also in about 2-3 millions being in Nahda Square, and all in different provinces in Egypt. They were there and they gave the answer that we are here, go ahead and kill us. We are ready to be killed in the sake of the freedom, in the sake of democracy, in the sake of legitimacy. That was the answer, not from the leaders. That was the answer from the Egyptian people who participated praying this morning in Rab'a al-Adawiyya.
Well, no, but I want to know what the Muslim Brotherhood and Freedom and Justice Party think their view actually is. Should violence be used to reinstate Mohamed Morsi?
We never commit any kind of violence. This is not the nature of the Muslim Brotherhood. And not only Muslim Brotherhood, because the people who were in Rab'a al-Adawiyya or Nahda Square, for instance, they are not only belong to Muslim Brotherhood. They only get 10% from the Muslim Brotherhood. For those people sit in Rab'a al-Adawiyya.
That's the biggest joke. This is the joke of the Eid, right, Mr. Sweden?
It's nice that I
10%.
A joke, but
you really made me laugh.
Mr. Khalid, I don't think that
I don't think you cannot guarantee my safety if I go to Rab'a. According to Amnesty, some of your opponents were killed inside the Rab'a sit-in. At least 11 people, according to Amnesty, were killed inside Rab'a. You chop the fingers of anyone you hold and accuse of
Let's give our third
wrong,
guest a chance at this point.
Peaceful.
Adel Iskander, this is a very revealing moment actually in our debate about what's going on the streets of Egypt. It seems to me, what is your assessment? Is there a real potential for violence? Some people even talk about a civil war, like what's going on in Syria.
I think all the talk of civil war is extremely far-fetched, largely because Egyptian society and the makeup of society doesn't facilitate that kind of response. Nevertheless, I think the language of victimization, as you've seen from both of the other guests, is part and parcel of political confrontation in the country. So neither side is prepared to or they've both basically absolved themselves of any wrongdoing on the part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Whether or not there is videographic evidence of them using violence, there's still a language of incitement of violence. What they say to the international community is very different to what they say to their adherents domestically, and anybody who follows Egyptian media very closely is able to identify deny the fact that the discourse among the Muslim Brotherhood, within the group, is reaching a crescendo. And both Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, as well as the Egyptian Initiative for Personal Rights, they've all published reports recently of torture within Rabaa al-Adawiyya against opponents and elsewhere. And then conversely, on the other side, you're hearing the supporters of the interim government and the National Salvation Front effectively absolving the security forces of the current government of any responsibility for wrongdoing. So basically, the stalemate is one where both sides are absolving themselves of any wrongdoing and presenting themselves as victims. And this is really the problem in Egyptian society.
Why are you shaking your head? Why are you shaking your head, Khalid
Yes.
Dawood? I want to ask you, because I mean, do you think the people who killed those Muslim Brotherhood supporters on July the 26th will be brought to account?
No, I mean, I'm with due full respect to Mr. Iskandar from Washington, but I don't think we can be on equal footing because we did issue a statement condemning the excessive use of force by the Egyptian police and the Egyptian army, whether in the first incident of killing in front of the Republican Guard on July 5th, and the second incident in which the police definitely used excessive force in the demonstrations or the attempt by the Muslim Brotherhood supporters to expand.
Condemnations.
No, can I please quickly? I mean, because we also have a roadmap that's intentionally aimed at restoring parliamentary and presidential elections in Egypt within the framework of 9 months to 1 year. We do not want to exclude any party. We don't use the same hatred language and the language of dividing the country into believers and non-believers. We do not disregard, as the Muslim Brotherhood do, the very violent situation in Sinai in which soldiers are being killed every day.
Is that what you're doing? Let me ask you that, Mohammed Saoud. Is that right? You're dividing the Egyptian people into believers and non-believers?
Let me tell you this, and we never say this because we have also Christians, liberal, secular in Rabaa al-Adawiyya and Nahda. Then we never divide. Who divide is Marshal Sisi and other side who support him and support the coup. Because they said, if you go to Tahrir Square, you're going to find some protesters and the police and the army protect them. And if you go Rabaa al-Adawiyya, you find that everybody is against them. I mean, the police and the army and the police not protecting them with, they also fight them. They also attack them. Here is the kind of deviation.
All right.
The leaders of the country right now, the leaders of the coup, who divided the Egyptian people to two divisions. Who support the coup and who do not support the coup.
If you keep on, Mr. Sweden, if you keep on describing the army generals and the people in the army as being infidels and you call them as traitors and you physically attack their locations, I mean, I don't really expect that they will come to protect you because you want to class them.
Let me interrupt here because I want to move the discussion along.
Kids in coffins and calling for martyrdom. We don't call for any martyrdom. You don't care about the country. You don't care about the country.
Viewers watching this are going to be not at all surprised that the mediation efforts have not worked. But let me put this to you. Look, eventually, the stalemate will end and it will be through some sort of political settlement. It seems that the mediation efforts have failed if the statements of the interim Prime Minister and President are to be believed. So how do you shorten that time? How do you lessen the risk of violence to ordinary Egyptians who need this to be resolved? How do we get to the next phase? Let me ask you to answer that first, Khalid Dawood.
Well, again, you know, the next phase is to basically agree to the roadmap that was declared on July 3rd, according to which we're going to be writing a new constitution, hopefully soon, much better than the constitution that was written by the Muslim Brotherhood alone. Basically, you know, a regression from any democratic constitution that we were looking for. So
it's either the roadmap or nothing.
Soon after that, we're going to have parliamentary elections and we're going to have new presidential elections because, again, you see the problem that the person who started this division of the country was the former president, Mohammed Morsi, who only cared about the interests of his group, who only cared about filling the positions in the government with members of the Muslim Brotherhood. That was the reason why the Egyptian people, I don't want anyone to minimize or to disregard the fact that about 20 million Egyptian people went out on June 30 asking former President Morsi to leave. He was the one who was stubborn. He refused to listen listen to the voice of reason, and compare the situation to Tunisia, where now we have someone like Rashid Ghannouchi. When he finds also some opposition to his Islamic rule, he said, okay, fine, if the way out of this stalemate is to hold new elections, let's hold new elections to save the country, but don't make a civil strife in the country, don't attack the Christians in the south of Egypt, and then claim that you care about the country. That's the way out. The way out is the roadmap, which is going to lead us to a new round of elections.
Well,
and
that
not
doesn't sound like it's a very
compromising
compromising position, though. Well, what I mean, are you saying that there is no role for the Muslim Brotherhood?
No, on the contrary. I'm telling you repeatedly, Veronica, they are definitely, it's their right as Egyptians to take part in parliament elections. It's their right. We even invited them in the yesterday the announcement of the formation of the 50-member committee that will draft the constitution. There are chairs reserved for them. Even when Mr. Beblawi, the prime minister, came into office, there were portfolios that were offered to the Muslim Brotherhood. So it's not, nobody wants to exclude. Simply the president failed, like Mubarak failed, and the Egyptian people went out against him. The army sided with the Egyptian people on January 25th, and the army, the National Army of Egypt, sided with the Egyptian people on June 30th.
This is a complex question, actually. Let me ask Mohammed Sudan, actually, in Alexandria, about your response to what Khaled Daoud has been saying, and also to ask you, a very difficult question about how one is to judge or react to a situation where it seems like a majority of the population is supporting this military ouster.
I'm really wondering what Mr. Khalid is saying. What is the majority? The majority to stay on one day by the mobilization of Marshal Sisi by force, to force the people to get out the street, and just 1 day or 2 days, and say that he is obeying the desire of the will of the Egyptian people. How about those people who are staying for 40 days in the street? Now Dr. Morsi is a legitimate president to Egypt till now. He called before this kind of coup take place that we can go with negotiation. We call all the opponents to come to the table, do a national dialogue, and see what we can do. Only if they wait for 3 months, then the electoral, the parliamentary election we're gonna go through, then everything gonna be in legitimate way. But now I believe the people in the streets is still uprising or is still demonstrate against the coup. A lot of only 5 countries in all over the world are recognize this kind of coup, and all other countries in all over the world they do not accept it. Even the AU rejected, and they say that's clearly.
We mustn't forget about Adel Iskander in Washington. I want to ask you about the American efforts at mediation, and whether, there's a sense in which mediation could make things worse. Also, I want to point out that there have been a couple of events that may indicate there is some confidence building going on. The Brotherhood has allowed a human rights organization and a European Parliament delegation to visit the Rabaa al-Adawiya sit-in, and prosecutors have dropped one of the main charges against the head of the Brotherhood's political wing, Saad al-Khatani. What is your sense about the value of mediation, Adel?
Well, to a large extent, I think the problems in Egypt can only be resolved when Egyptians realize that they can overcome these significant differences. Unfortunately, a big sort of break has been created within Egyptian society, and it looks like, as you've seen from the discussion thus far, that they don't really speak to each other. They speak across from each other, each of them with legitimate points, but in some cases not acknowledging their own blunders. The Americans are in a really tough spot, largely because as a political entity, they've supported every horse in this race. They support the military financially and politically. They also have supported the Muslim Brotherhood over the last period and have legitimized them politically. Today, the Muslim Brotherhood turned to the U.S. for affirmation and for mediation. So when John McCain travels to Egypt and describes this as a coup, it makes its way into, it's splashed across the Muslim Brotherhood pages. So it's a tricky situation for both sides, but I don't think America is in a position to really resolve the situation. They neither carry a carrot nor a stick. Nothing is particularly appealing to the Egyptians, and Egypt is becoming increasingly sovereign over time. So this will have to be resolved on the ground by Egyptians, and I think there are positive steps steps towards that, despite what appears to be a head-on collision between our two other guests.
Yeah, it does seem that the political landscape in Egypt is far more pluralistic than it was, and there is also a high level of political engagement. Khaled Dawood and Mohammed Sodan, I want to ask you whether you think that this is a stark choice between military rule and democracy.
Well, if I'm being asked the question, of course, I hope that we're heading towards true democracy, because what we witnessed under the Muslim Brotherhood for the past year did not have anything to do with democracy at all. On the contrary, former President Morsi basically did not respect a single promise he gave to the Egyptian people before his election. He promised us that we were going to write our constitution together. This did not happen. He promised he will have a cabinet that includes a variety of ministers from all trends on the basis of their skills. This did not happen. He promised even to have a vice president who's a Copt, one woman, one young person. This did not happen. So that's basically what led a lot of Egyptian people, and more important, of course, the social economic aspect, that the lives of Egyptians did not improve. Former President Morsi and his Muslim Brotherhood government failed to deliver. It was not only the National Salvation Front that wanted to change the cabinet. Former President Morsi was very stubborn.
But there's a sense in which, Khaled Dawood, that this is just part of the transition process. So let me turn to Mohammed Sodan and ask you, what kind of political culture do you think will emerge? One of the problems at the moment is that there are no venues to find common ground between your two starkly divided sides.
Actually, I believe that the thing which should be happen, as Marshal Sisi listened for the Salvation Front and the Black Bloc and all those people protested in Tahrir Square and being protected by the police and by the army. Also, he should listen for the other side, who are supporting the legitimacy and democracy. Then let us go to the first step should be releasing all the people being arrested in just a few days. More than 2,000 people now arrested. It should release the legitimate president from the kidnapping, which they did it with these assistants. No one knows where they are. I don't know what kind of a democracy it is. And then just to leave everything out of the prison and to unfreeze their money, also their budget.
So let me ask you something, Mohammed Sodan. You haven't mentioned there the reinstatement of President Morsi, which was previously a major point in your demands, as it were, to the government to come off the streets. Let me ask you if that is now something that the Muslim Brotherhood acknowledges is not realistic and will not happen.
Actually, now we are not talking about Mohamed Morsi as president. Now we are talking about something against the law, something against democracy. How come they detained the legitimate president and his assistant in somewhere no one knows? That this is not meeting any kind of law in all over the world. You should release them, and all the other 2,000 people belong to the other political parties and Islamist movement. You should release them first. And then we can go to reconciliation and go to the negotiations in the ground of freedom. But how come that they arrested me and I'm wanted, and then they come in the other side and tell me that please go to negotiation? This is not the starting of some kind of reconciliation and any kind of negotiation.
All right. Let me very briefly, I'm sorry, we are running out of time here.
Let me very... point, Veronica. If Mr. Sodan is saying they don't want President Morsi back into office, I think that will solve a lot of our problems. We can move on from that, because we cannot keep on looking to the back. We have to move forward, and that's what the Muslim Brotherhood are failing to do.
All right.
That would be a very good start if they gave up this demand that Morsi should be back as a president. I mean, definitely this will ease things very much.
All right, we're out of time, but I really want to ask Adel Iskander for a last word. Is this an opportunity for a new political culture in Egypt?
Yes, it is. Despite everything that we're seeing, I think that at the end of the day, Egyptians are much more politically conscious, much more engaged, and much more active. Unfortunately, what they need to do is come to realize that they cannot extricate or marginalize their political other, and that will take a little bit of time. So there may be a collision course, but this collision course will produce positive results in the long term. And then I think it's been very healthy and important for the Muslim Brotherhood to see their own blunders in front of their eyes and see the the outcome of that, in addition to holding the opposition to account when they falter. So I think the end product will be quite positive. In the meantime, it seems much more tumultuous and turbulent, but hopefully this will come to pass as well.
Thank you very much indeed to all our guests, Adel Iskander, Khaled Dawood and Mohammed Sodan. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. You can send your feedback by email to insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks again for watching and goodbye for now.